Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis, co-host of the Pagan World Congress, and welcome to my first of two workshops. Tonight I'm going to be talking about commonality, not unity. But before I start talking about that, I want to say that I hope you're enjoying the Congress. I am. We've had a number of wonderful presentations so far. We're still really at the very beginning. Many more are coming, even still tonight. And we have speakers speaking to all kinds of different aspects of things that are important to our future. And I've been enjoying the presentations, and I've especially enjoyed the presentations from some of the younger people. And, I have to say that I have reached a point in life that I look at the younger generation as being coming into its own. And I think the greatest victory for the older generation is to be able to look at the younger generation and say, well, they're doing well. They're doing better than we did. The future is in good hands. The greatest success for a teacher is that their students do even better than they did. The greatest success for a nation is that the next generation down does better than the last one. And this is how we move forward through history. This is how we move forward in life. And looking at the presentations so far in this Congress, I feel that as a community, we are very much moving forward. We are very much equipped for the battles that we are facing in this very challenging time. And yes, we have many things to look at, many things to consider, and a great deal of discussion as to how to go about dealing with those challenges. But I think that we have some very good people to do it. I want to say hello to all the people who are in the chat room, all the people watching. In watching the presentations so far, I've been very impressed. I don't know if I'll be able to do as well as some of those younger people. And that's a wonderful feeling, in my opinion. My path as a pagan priest began 50 years and more or less 1 month ago at the autumnal equinox of 1975. And at that time, I made my clerical dedication. And I have to tell you, I've seen a lot of things in that 50 years. Some of them very positive things, some of them very important lessons. And, we often forget that the failures we experience in life are not necessarily mistakes. They're our education. They're what we learn from. So when I look at those things that I've seen, I marvel at the great successes. But when I look at the things that failed, I don't feel bad about that, but I ask what went wrong. What were the mistakes that were made, and how do we not make them again? And that's part of what I want to talk about tonight. I would love to fill this entire presentation with talk about great successes I have seen and what we can learn from that. And the second part of the presentation is going to focus on that. But I feel like I also need to talk a little bit about those lessons that I have learned over the course of these many years. So I'm going to talk a little bit as we begin about the issue of self-sabotage, about internal crossed wires and ways that we trip ourselves up over issues that we do not consciously see. People trip over unconscious issues all the time in life. And if you follow my work, you will know that this is something I talk about all the time, usually under the heading of shadow work. Tonight, I'm going to talk about it in a very narrow context, but it is, I think, one of the most important issues for us to look at. For me, the main message of this Congress is common issues, common actions. And why do I say commonality, not unity? Why not united issues and united actions? Well, I'm going to explain that to you. And along the way, I'm going to speak a little bit about how we trip ourselves up sometimes. The difference between unity and commonality may not seem like a big difference to you. It may seem unimportant, but I'm going to explain to you why it's actually a very big difference and why it really does matter in ways that I think most people don't think about. That people often say that words have power, and they very much do. But very often when people say this, the real power of words is not necessarily what they're thinking of. It's not always the obvious thing. It's important to understand that the effective meaning of a word lies with the hearer of that word, not the speaker. If our goal in speaking is to get a message across, then it's what the hearer receives that's most important. And if a word means one thing to the speaker and something else to the hearer, then there is a big problem in that message. So when we're trying to communicate, we need to really consider what our words mean, not to us, but to our listeners. And this is, it's a subject that could fill a lot more than one presentation. Because language and the different ways in which it's used and understood is a huge subject. Every word has a denotation. That is to say, an official meaning that is more or less agreed upon. Sometimes it's one exact denotation. Sometimes a word will have several denotations. But these things are agreed upon. You'll find them in the dictionary. It will tell you what that word, quote, means, end quote, what it is denoted as. But in addition to its denotation, every word also has connotations, which is the unofficial way in which people may understand it. And this can be drastically different from the official connotation of that word. Can vary from person to person, can vary from culture to culture. All kinds of things influence it. And when we're trying to speak, as we are in this event, to a wide range of people in a wide range of places, we need to stop and consider the different ways in which people may understand our language. People who have studied things like neuro-linguistic programming will understand what I mean when I talk about the unconscious reaction that we have to words and why that's important. Often, what we consciously associate with a word is only a small part of what we're really reacting to. And that is why I'm drawing a big differentiation between commonality versus unity. Even though at a certain level, they're very similar concepts, but they have very different connotations. Unity has a very positive denotation. And for many people, it also has a positive connotation. However, for some people, it has a very negative connotation. And they're not always conscious of that. That negative connotation often comes from unconscious programming that they have been exposed to during their life, often in childhood. In conservative Christian circles, the idea of religious unity is a huge bugaboo. The idea of, quote, one world religion, end quote, is a major fear to these people. And they spend a great deal of time campaigning against this idea. And I have to call your attention to the fact that an awful lot of people in our pagan community actually come originally from a conservative Christian background. And they often will have those childhood tapes still playing in the back of their mind unless they've done the shadow work to address that programming. Sometimes that programming will come out at very unexpected moments when they don't even realize what they're reacting to. I think this has a lot to do with the famous pagan poverty consciousness and many other things that we have affecting our community, and it certainly has to do with issues around unity. I want to tell you a little story to illustrate this. And it's not really my story. It's Ed the Pagan's story, but it's been a big part of my life. And it's an important story from the first modern parliament of the world's religions, held in Chicago in 1993. At the Parliament of the World's Religions in 1993, there was a publication called Your Voice. This was an unofficial publication created informally on the floor of the Parliament among attendees and circulated across the floor of the Parliament with no official involvement from anyone. And it spoke a great deal, very hopefully, about the idea of unity, the idea of religious unity. And a number of the religious groups present basically flipped out over this. And the reason they flipped out over it is what I've just been describing. They had a very different reaction to what was being said versus the meaning of the people who were saying it. The people who created Your Voice meant unity, I believe, in the sense of united action, coming together in a united sense for the causes that appealed to everyone. But the people who were afraid of this heard one world religion. We're going to lose our independence. We're going to lose our diversity. We're going to lose our freedom. And they were quite upset about this. And even more upset when the copies of Your Voice were collected and published as a book. They really didn't want that to go out because they had a fear that they were going to frighten away many conservative religious types who were afraid of the idea of religious unity. There's a similar reaction in the pagan world to this reaction at the Parliament of the World's Religions. When pagans use the term unity, very often what they mean is united action. But very often what people hear is becoming one group and losing our diversity, losing our independence, losing our freedom. And I have to tell you that in the course of my career, I've seen an awful lot of people launch various initiatives around the idea of unity, only to watch them crash into the wall. One of the biggest reasons is they never took into account the unconscious programming that so many people have around this word. This is why I'm wanting to talk about commonality, about common issues and common action. We're not going to have unity. We will never have, and I don't think many of us want, one perfect organization for us all to come together under. But it would be nice if we could come together more or less informally around our common issues and take common actions. Things that don't affect our diversity, that don't affect our independence, that don't affect our freedom. And I think that it's very important in this very challenging time that we're dealing with right now, that we stop and take note of the fact that many of our people have these fears and that we try to deal with these situations in ways that do not trigger them. I've said that I would spend the second half of this presentation talking about success, and that's what I want to turn to now. In the years of my career, I've seen a lot of groups come and sometimes go. I've seen many groups be tremendously successful. I've seen many groups flame out very quickly. I've also seen a lot of people undertaking community actions which were intended to draw together people from across our community from many different backgrounds. And there too, I've seen both successes and failures. And the successes that I would like to call your attention to are these. The Goddess 2000 project, the Pentacle Quest, Pagan Pride Day, and the Pagans Tonight radio network. These were all highly successful actions that drew people together from disparate backgrounds to focus on things that they had in common issues, and did not attempt to force them into any sort of unified organization, but let them take part as they chose to. Those who did not wish to take part did not have to. Those who did could find their place. Each one of them had an organization behind it, but in each case, the organization mostly stayed behind it and allowed people to take part at their own pace. I think that at this time, with so many political challenges facing us and the danger of much greater challenges coming, we need to learn this lesson. There are people who would love to get everyone together in one big, perfect organization, but that, in my opinion, is a waste of time, demonstrated by the fact that it's failed so many other times. But what we can do, and what I hope this Congress will help us to do, is to find our common issues and bring people together for voluntary common actions that they can take part in when they choose to, and that challenge no one's independence, no one's freedom, and help us all to move forward. The Goddess 2000 project, if you remember it, you have to be a certain age to remember it, was an art project from the late 1990s. And the motto of the Goddess 2000 project was a goddess on every block. The idea was very simple: to create as many goddess-centered works of art as possible. Didn't matter who you were, didn't matter what your tradition was, what your background was. People from all kinds of traditions took part in this. Christians and Jewish people took part in this as well, even though it was a primarily pagan project. All kinds of people around the world took part. This was the brainchild of Abby Willerroot, and it was brilliant. It was the first really successful cross-community project in modern pagan history. And the fact that it focused on the action, not on who was taking part, welcomed everyone who wanted to take part, is what made it so successful. I realize a lot of the younger generation don't remember it now, but if you're old enough to remember it then, you will know how extremely successful it was. And while it may not have exactly put a goddess on every block, it came awfully close. And of course, it achieved its goal in the year 2000 with goddess art displays across the US and around the world. And that was a wonderful thing. The Pentacle Quest. Again, not everyone now remembers the Pentacle Quest. You have to go back 20 years, 30 years to when it began. But this was the quest to obtain for pagan service people in the United States the right to have, particularly for Wiccan service people, the symbol of their religion on their tombstone in national cemeteries. And it took a long time and a lot of campaigning to do this. And when it really ramped up, it was involving people from all across our community and in all kinds of different ways. It wasn't forcing them into one mold. It wasn't forcing them into one organization. It was giving them a common cause that they could help with. And all kinds of people did. And eventually, we won. It was arguably the greatest civil rights quest of its kind in our community history. Pagan Pride Day. Pagan Pride Day, which is still going on today, is a series of public events free to the public to educate the wider public about what paganism is. It is based on the original example of the Chicago Pagan Expos from about 20 years ago. But it has been tremendously successful. And one of the reasons it's been so successful is that everyone who wants to take part can take part. From whatever background you happen to come from, whatever pagan background you happen to come from, you can have a table at your pagan pride if you are willing to go along with the few basic rules of the event. And it is an event. There is an organization, to be sure, but it's mostly a series of events. And again, everyone can take part. They don't lose any aspect of their independence, any aspect of their diversity. That is the secret of its success. You can go, and everybody there is equal with everybody else. The Pagans Tonight radio network, for a decade, this was a huge radio phenomenon, and it welcomed people from all kinds of different backgrounds to come and do their own program that didn't have to be the same as the people who are running it. It could represent whatever your background was. It was run by witchghoul.com. There certainly was an organization behind it, but having a show was simply a format that you could use. And that allowed us to bring together a wide range of people to express a wide range of messages. What do all these things have in common? They do not transgress on the people taking part. They don't try to force a point of view on anybody. They don't restrict anyone's independence or give anything that would lead you to believe they would. This is, I think, very important now when we're trying to talk about how do we organize to deal with the political challenges we're facing. I think that it's very important as we look at that, and I'm going to speak in my second presentation later this weekend on where I really think we need to be putting a lot of our energy, and that is thinking metaversally and acting locally. But even when we're talking about acting nationally or internationally, when we're talking about things like political activism, things like letter writing campaigns, things like voter registration, in doing these, we must focus on that common action, not get caught up in who it is, but what it is. We must focus on what is truly important here, which is achieving the goal. So often, people get all caught up in trying to make the perfect organization, the perfect group. This is not a moment for perfection. Perfection is a stopper. Let me tell you another story. I'm at that age in life where I tell a lot of stories. We call it the grandpa years. I used to know a person who was a wonderful artist. You may know that I am an artist. And that's part of how I knew this person. They were very talented. They had a dream of becoming a professional artist. They never did. The reason they never did is that they had an idea in their head of what they wanted to create, and they could never quite create it. It was never quite good enough. It was never perfect. Now, speaking as a professional artist, what they were doing was fine. It was great, but it wasn't good enough for them. And it stopped them from ever moving forward. This happens in the pagan community constantly. And if you watch for it, you'll see it. People setting up such lofty ideals that they cannot reach them, which prevents them from ever having to take any responsibility for the things they were trying to do because they can't be good enough. What we need to do now is find our common issues and focus on our common actions and not worry about being perfect, not worry about meeting every consideration, but see what we can do to help move those issues forward. And um, and Kayleen in the chat room says, as Voltaire said, perfect is the enemy of the good. And I have to tell you, this is absolutely so. I have seen this many times. And, in our organization, we have the saying, which also comes from Ed the Pagan, progress over perfection. It does not matter how perfect something could potentially be if it never gets finished, if it never gets done. It matters to have progress in getting it done, getting it out into the world. If you're writing a novel, it does not matter that you find the most perfect way to say everything if you never finish the last page. It only matters if someone one day reads your novel. And if it's not the ideal perfection that you envisioned, it's still better to put it into someone's hands to read it, because then it becomes real to more than just yourself. When we look at the position our community is currently in with the rise of Christian dominionism, the rise of Christian nationalism, we do not have time to be arguing about perfection. We do not have time to be dealing with subconscious programming if we can avoid it. We need to focus on what will work, what will help us to come together for our common issues and make actual progress with them. In this particular presentation, I'm not going to tell you particularly what I think we can exactly do about that, other than avoiding these mistakes. But I think that actually may be one of the most important steps. There are many other people talking about what we can do. I'll be talking, as I say, in my next presentation about what we can do. But in this one, I want to emphasize the importance of avoiding terms like unity, which cause people to throw up psychological protections and often doom the projects that they're involved in. Yes, I know a lot of people are very attached to that word. I had a long conversation with a very dear friend just the other day who was very attached to that word unity. But the problem is it carries all of this baggage. And this is true of many other words that we encounter. One of the most important things I've learned through, in part, the Parliament of the World's Religions is the idea of interfaith language. What is interfaith language, you may ask? And that is using words when you're dealing with a diverse group of people that you have reason to think they will understand, and avoiding jargon that you have reason to think they may not. If you can find a simpler, clearer word to help people to come together, you have done well. If the words you're using are putting up barriers, you're sabotaging yourself. And at this time in particular, avoiding self-sabotage, I think, is very important to our community. Now, if you follow my work, or for that matter, if you follow Ed the Pagan, you will know that we've both been talking about the rise of Christian nationalism for decades now. If you watched Midday with Rev Don in the last couple of years, you'll know that I often talked about Project 2025. And how many times did people come and tell me, this is nonsense, this will never happen, you're fear-mongering, you're being ridiculous. Well, here we are, it's happening. We knew, we saw, anyone who listened to us should have known, and yet many people were surprised. I mentioned this because that was an act of self-sabotage on many people's parts. They were told what was happening, told why we knew, which is because one of us had a background in that movement, shown various pieces of evidence, and still chose to reject it because it was not pleasant to them. Now it's in full force. Our question now, the only question that we really have, in my opinion, is how do we react to this? How do we survive this? How do we go ahead and still build our future with all of this happening? And, that's what this Congress is all about. And different people are putting forward many different ideas, and they're all good. We should work on all of them as we feel called. What we must not do is argue over what group we're going to belong to, argue over what is the perfect way of doing anything, but rather find the things we can do now and do them now. So I want to say to you, as you deal with the rest of this Congress, look at what has meaning to you. Look at what represents to you the most effective things you can do to build a better future for our community. We have people who are talking about education. Maybe that's where you want to put your emphasis. We have people who are talking about civil rights and political activism. Maybe that's where you want to put your emphasis. We have people who are talking about various metaphysical things that one can do. Maybe that's where you want to put your emphasis. We have people talking about academic subjects. Maybe that's where you want to put your emphasis. We have a lot of people talking about infrastructure. All of these are needed. It's not just one. And there's not just one path for all of us to follow in going forward to deal with these. And all of us who are attending this Congress have common issues, but they aren't going to necessarily be the same from one to the next. And as we look for our common issues, where we want to put our common actions, we really need to be listening to our own heart, to what's important to us, and to what we're actually willing to do. And then we need to do it. And again, we don't need to be perfect. We need to actually take action. We don't need to talk about it for 20 years. We don't need to go out and build the perfect organization with the perfect bylaws. That's a waste of time at this moment. We need to find actual activities that will move forward our common interests, and we need to act on them. And that basically concludes what I wanted to say on this subject. I hope you find it helpful, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the Congress. I will be speaking later in the weekend about thinking metaversally and acting locally. And that is where I want to put a lot of my emphasis, and where you choose to put yours, where you choose to put your common actions, is really your choice and no one's choice but you. You don't need anyone to tell you what you should do. You don't need anyone to tell you what you must do. Although people can certainly give you ideas, they can warn you of possible mistakes, they can encourage you, they can inspire you. But only you can identify your common issues, and only you can undertake those common actions. With that, I thank you for your attention. I love you all. Many blessings to all of you, and I shall bid you